We are going live. Okay, everybody, we are live, and it's so awesome to be here today with you. Um, I'm Ross Evans, founder of ExtraCycle. I'm told that I'm not terribly good at self-promoting, but I also was told nobody out there necessarily, we might just be meeting for the first time. So I wanted to introduce myself. Going way back, I was just thinking today, built my first electric cargo bike 22 years ago. When I was an engineering student. I spent a year out in Hampshire College or Amherst, Massachusetts, and that was dove into a bunch of this stuff. That was following up with a fellowship from Nicaragua. So we're going to dive into a bunch of these details. But in short, I'm here today to present to you really my passion, my love, and invite you into, maybe you're already in, which is awesome. I mean, so many of the people that are part of this call are people who are well on the inside, meaning they're riding day to day. And what I'm so excited to do is actually begin to get us all as a community to ride together. So we'll touch upon later, one of our core values is we ride together, and we take that so seriously here at ExtraCycle. Um, but within that, I just wanted to kind of kick things off with a couple of top points. So if you saw nothing else, I wanted you to make sure you took away these 3 points. The first one is that we started this. ExtraCycle is the original lifestyle cargo bike. And we'll go into more what that means, but in essence, it means that before ExtraCycle, there was 1.0, which was bikes that get work done, right? So get work done was, think about Worksman and all these bikes carrying milk and even getting kids to school. Bikes have been used to get work done. What ExtraCycle brought in 2.0 was to come alive, to become more fully a version of ourselves. And I kind of think of it as this awesome kind of modern day. We think about van life, and yet before van life, there were sort of skeezy dudes living in vans, right? So we know that there's this moment where things pop open and they become open, and I think that's what we're seeing, and that's what ExtraCycle has stood for, and that's what I'm here really today to usher, well, bring us all together, those of us who are inside the lifestyle and those who are looking in from the outside saying, I don't know, is this something that I would love to do? And saying, hey, I think you might really enjoy this. So to that end, that's number one. Number two was that we continue to innovate. ExtraCycle is it's in our blood. I do have an engineering degree, but that's just one small part of it. It's in my blood. You'll see in this presentation that I just can't help but try to improve things and to grow them and to come up with innovative ways to solve problems. And within that, one of the biggest innovations has been this lifestyle that we've found our way into, and it's awesome. And I'm so excited to share that with you. Number three, I can tell you without a shadow of doubt, we at ExtraCycle care so deeply about your success in this lifestyle. We live to create that shift from people looking in from the outside saying, hey, that looks neat, but I don't know if I can do it. And all these sort of internal doubts that come up for people. We state our purpose at ExtraCycle is to empower people with transformational tools that move the body and spirit. And to that end, it goes so far beyond the hardware. We in the bike world just get so trapped up around like, oh, well, what's the frame and what are the wheels? And the reality is like that's just such a small part of this. Of course, we've been doing it the longest, but lots and lots of people of course have come in and continue to make neat bikes, and that's all awesome. But what I wanted to say more than anything, this call is really fundamentally about people like us do things like this. This is a shout out to all of you who are kind of looking in or are part of it and saying we're doing this. And as a part of that, what I'm kind of getting at is I want to say more than anything, we are here to help usher in a movement of people who are become lifelong bicycling lifestylists, and that's why we call it the original lifestyle cargo bike, because the world that comes alive to us is not so much about, like, you have to kind of rewind way back, and I had to go back and look at some videos, and it used to be like shouting at cars and you guys, yeah, down with cars, and it was really this negative vibe, and the lifestyle is about, I don't know what you see over there, but we're having a blast over here. And I think more and more what's happening is people are catching on that this lifestyle, this when you ride a bike, when yeah, it is a little harder. Yeah, you do face the elements. Yesterday I got soaked riding with the two boys to school, and yet it was a huge adventure, and I just felt so alive, and I kind of actually felt a little bit of pity for the car drivers that were kind of huddled underneath their screens trying to look out and see what's going on, and we were just like, woohoo, we're just in it. And so that's what I'm talking about. That's the before and after, and I just am so excited to take you through this. So if you heard nothing else, I wanted to make sure you heard that straight from me, from my heart to you. I'm super excited today to take you through this journey that we call values-driven design. So with that said, I'm going to attempt to make a transition, which is always exciting. And we'll see if this works. Let's see if this works. Oh man, looks like it might be working. Okay, awesome. So we've playfully dubbed this Edge Running with Ross Evans. If you know me at all, you know that that I love this concept of edge running. And edge running has to do with, these days we kind of think of it as almost like ordinary heroes. It's really, there's extreme edge running in a certain sense, which is those people who are really out on the edge. They are visionary. They are taking the arrows in the back kind of a thing. But in our world, what we've seen is actually the important culture change that happens. And this was inspired. This name was inspired by a luminary mentor and hero of mine, Paul Stamets, who coined the term edge runner, and I just thought it was so perfect. And he was talking about mycelium, which was actually a fungi. If you're familiar with these mycelial networks, it's really the foundation that's moving biology forward. And how cool of an idea to think of those of us who are willing to do something hard for the benefit of other people that are moving our culture forward in a positive way. So to that end, I'm just inviting you into this edge running journey, and I'm super excited to do that with you. Let's see if I can advance my slide. Look at that. I kind of already gave you the overview why we're here, so I think I'll just say that, yeah, it's a super exciting time. So again, just to review, we have this idea of values-driven design. And so within that, what values-driven design to me is all about is to say, again, we kind of talked about people like us do things like this. What are our values? What are our core values? And what's governing that? And not everybody is on that. This extra cycle is a unique brand and a culture and a value set that doesn't necessarily match with everybody. But what I can say is that we have set out to change the world. With lack of a better word, as grandiose as that might sound, we orient in a way to say that our value is to, and the reason I emphasized at the beginning that the importance of the lifestyle and the importance of the innovation and the importance of the community and the importance of coming together to ride bikes and to live this freedom and expression so that all those who look in see it, is that we're looking to create the change. Honestly, I mean, we're coming up on a bunch of climate change things, and there's a lot of dire kind of negative and difficult aspects to that message, and to be honest, I mean, I know climate scientists, and I share their fears, honestly, and yet I have this tool and I have this belief because I've seen it personally that we can make a difference. And this is not about the climate. This is just about living a really, really great life that happens to also be highly aligned with a synergistic sort of shared experience on this blue-green sphere we call Earth, our home, right? So to that end, I think at its core, at its essence, when I think about values-driven design, it says, where do I want to end up, and what's the beautiful way I can get there? And so to that end, I'm inviting you into this story. Again, just to kind of recap, Cargo Bike 1.0 was get work done. So think about carrying stuff on a bike. Think about just kind of like, okay, got to move this stuff around. That's, bikes have been amazing. And for years and years, they've been used like that. There was a period of about 100 years where they were very minimally used in that way. Kind of fell out of favor. Cars took over, trucks took over, but we're seeing a real resurgence of bikes carrying stuff, which is awesome, and we're totally on board with that. And we have some really neat partnerships happening in the world that will be using our high quality bikes to move goods around. But my deep passion is actually what we think of as Cargo Bike 2.0, which is to come alive. And to come alive speaks to this experience when you watch somebody who's just like jamming and they're just loving life and they're having a great time and they're healthy and they're vibrant and they're connected and they're living on purpose. This is it's a vision. There's no question about it. All of us, are on track sometimes and off track sometimes, but to come alive means it's actually a verb. It's like love, right? It's like you can't be love, you can be loving, right? And so I think to our our orientation when you ride these bikes, when you engage with this experience, to come alive. That's what our bikes are designed to do, and that's our commitment as a brand, as a company, as a team. I was just thinking about today, we're around 12 people, kind of some people part-time and contractors, but I mean, it's an incredible, I'm just so incredibly indebted and just deeply, deeply grateful for the team that has gathered around to further this vision, this mission, which is really about helping people come alive. And one of my favorite all-time quotes was from Howard Thurman. If you're not familiar with Howard Thurman, he was basically kind of the mentor of Martin Luther King Jr. And I mean, just a way ahead of his time kind of dude. And he said this really cool thing. He says, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And many of you on this call potentially are thinking, what makes me come alive? Am I on course? Am I off course? Am I living in alignment with my values? And I'm just here to say, we're all just trying to figure this out. But that's what Extra Cycle stands for. This is a community, a vibrant group of people who are trying to figure out, how can I come alive today? How can I come alive today? And that's part of the reason why we continue to innovate, because we say, wow, well, it'd be cool to experience this new thing. And so we develop that, and that's kind of part of the evolution. So onward. I couldn't do this presentation without a quick shout out to my grandpa, Goodwin. I know grandpa's spelled wrong, but I think of him as grandpa. So uh, Lloyd Otis Goodwin, he just, wherever you are in the world, just know I'm so grateful for all of your support and inspiration. As you see in this picture, this is my granddad. He was a mechanical engineer, patent lawyer. Ended up actually in his youth, when he was in college, invented the parking meter, and ended up sort of through various things, very poor kid, on a farm, and ended up getting like $100 for it. And I always say, like, that's kind of this, maybe that's the reason he became a patent lawyer. He's like, I'm not going to let that happen again. So I think there's there's no doubt he's left a major impression on my DNA. He was a risk taker and lived outside of the bounds, and just deeply infused that into me. So I can't say enough gratitude for Grandpa Goodwin getting us this point. So just wanted to cover a little bit of history here. This is me, kind of going way back in time to my first bike, and you could see it was a hand-me-down, and yet, talk about coming alive. I mean, this is just what it's all about. And I thought this would be a good point to introduce um, our 5 core values as a company. And I think what I'll invite you to see is that as the progenitor, the creator of Extra Cycle, and really now having been honored by many people as the pioneer, or the leader of the cargo bike movement. um, I can look back and see how these influences in my life kind of made me who I am, and I'm just want to share that with you, because I want you to see that this thing runs deep. I think that's what really stands out to me, and why it's sort of important to tell these stories, because I think you can see that this has been a lifelong journey for me, and that's why it makes it so important that Extra Cycle exists to help and support you through our products and our service and our community on a lifelong journey of your own. Wherever you are in life, I believe that we can work together. So one of our core, our first, we stated as our first core value is be a good butterfly. And to that, it's really all about saying, when you're moving through the world, we know we're having an influence on one another. This is a reference to Edward Lorenz, the MIT physicist, who talked about basically the butterfly effect, if you've heard of that. And in his paper, he said, well, if a butterfly, by flapping its wings, can cause change the weather in Tokyo, like, what, we're thinking like, wow, that's kind of a crazy notion of chaos theory and this idea. But we say, well, if that's true, then let's at least make sure that our intentions are good, that our actions are in alignment with an outcome that we would really love to see come to the world. And so you can see this happening for me early on. I just love riding my bike. This is an example of, my grandfather was really into Airstream trailers. He was on the international board of the Wally Byam Caravan Club, which is the Airstreams or early people, and just deeply got embedded in here. And big shout outs to team on the line here. This is, talk about edge runners. I mean, the people who have started bike shops to support this movement are, I mean, so rare and so needed and so phenomenal. And if you are blessed to have a shop that that we list on our site, that's in your town, I mean, it's, you don't realize how blessed you are. for us, unfortunately, tons and tons of people spread across the world, but we're mostly focused now on North America. Don't have that nearby, and so that's part of the reason we'll get into why we've had to develop ways to help get quality bikes to people. But by all means, if you have one of these shops nearby, you are just incredibly blessed. So shout out to Davey, shout out to Four Star. You guys are awesome. And any other of your other online, please let me know because I'd love to know you're there with us. So just to go back, you could see the bikes on there. You could see, this is going the summers that we would spend going and traveling around the country, seeing national parks and riding our bikes, and just kind of deeply embedded in me the spirit of adventure. The other piece that be a good butterfly has to do with is be of service. Find ways to serve others, and and I can say that for a fact that that my deepest impression early on in life was to serve, and that I had some powerful and profound early experiences by how happy it made me to help. And so this was a service project. We put on a roof on a Native American reservation in Southern California. It was a kind of service project trip one summer, sweltering heat, and I just still think back to that with such fond memories, even though it was just incredibly hot. And it turns out, like, just right next door there was this chicken farm, and whenever the wind would blow, this the stench of that chicken, whatever, the smell across. But it was like you're kind of like torn between wanting the smell of chicken in the breeze. But anyway, so just to say, the evolution for me, of course, went on to ride bikes of all sorts. As I mentioned at the beginning, I built and rode my first electric cargo bike 22 years ago. But all these evolution, what I think is funny, I was looking back through photos and I couldn't find a photo of me just riding my bike to school. And it was something I did all the way through high school, and it was kind of weird. It was that early edge running stage for me, and I remember because it's not cool in high school to be all sweaty, and I would inevitably leave for school late, and so I would just be sprinting hard to get there because I had this hardcore policy where like you couldn't go to class if you got there late at all. So I would arrive and I'd just be like dripping with sweat. And I remember this kid slapped me on the back, like, "Whoa, dude, like that's nasty," But I just was like, I didn't care. I was like, I believed so much in riding a bike, and I got so much juice from that. So but it was interesting, right? We never took pictures of that. I have this picture of riding 100-mile races, and that seemed worthy of photography. But again, going back, that was a big part of my history. So you know big deal. Grow up, you can see lots of bikes in my life. Clearly, believe in that. The next phase was leaving Tucson, Arizona, where I grew up and where my dad still lives today, and moving to Northern California, to Palo Alto, where I went to Stanford, and so thus began the Stanford experiment. And one of the things that I'll kind of try to weave in as our core values. The second one was run the edges. And as I was talking about, running the edges had to do with riding your bike to school when it was cool to drive or whatever. But it also had to do with, for me, running the edges and in the company. This first thing that I did when I went to Stanford, as a freshman, I basically decided that I was going to try to write my freshman English paper. Everybody had to take this kind of core English class, and I just didn't want to write about something dumb. And I convinced them to let me take an incomplete, actually, and got the library to buy all these books from around the world so I could basically write about bicycles around the world and how they were being used to impact people in poverty. That was my real interest, trying to bring together, again, bikes and service. You kind of see a theme here. So with that in mind, I finished that, and then the next year I thought, oh, I'm gonna make a really cool bike. I'm gonna take this class, this mechanical engineering class called ME 103, which is engineering and design, and we learn how to weld and machine and cast and all this really 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 cool stuff. Totally changed my life. And what I found so interesting, I went into that class with this idea. I'm gonna make this cool like trailer or something out of used bike parts. I was thinking, okay, how do we do this in the developing world? Maybe there's used bikes and we could kind of make them work. Well, what you see kind of comes out of the Stanford process is like, it got what became called, gilding the lily, was, this kind of, this is a TIG welded, brand new wheels, all this stuff. Like, it totally drifted from the original vision of how do I make something out of used parts. But you can see how this kind of ultimately impacted me. And in fact, that translated when I first went to Nicaragua in 1995. I went there, and the first thing we did was we built a bike trailer, because I thought that's that's what we saw. That's what I saw in my research, that bikes existed, and that a trailer seemed like the most obvious way to move stuff around, right? It was just attach that onto an existing bike, and sure enough, you can just throw stuff on there. Well, it turns out that the feedback I got and what I learned in Nicaragua, as much as I was well-meaning and trying to make it work, it didn't work. It turned out that, that's the classic sort of fantastic aspect about the Stanford design process, is that the whole point is to you learn how to make stuff so that you can then put it in motion and then see how people respond to it and then break it and then fix it and iterate. And so you can see the spirit through the history of ExtraCycle has been one of experimentation, iteration, creation, feedback. And I think this is just kind of this humble first starting point where we started out, trying to make a trailer. And maybe many of you know what went wrong with that. It turned out that, in most of the world that doesn't have a dominance of cars, people walk to get around. So the 2/3 of the world, or the developing world, it's just most common that people carry stuff and they walk. And so that's your original single track path, right? Well, a trailer has 3 tracks, right? You've got the bike track and then the 2 wheels on the side, and it just didn't work. It was too bumpy and wobbly, and just you couldn't navigate these paths that people needed to go. So that said, okay, well, that's clearly not going to work. And again, so trying to follow a good design process, I'm sketching my ideas and writing them. And I was very proud. You could see I was learning how to write like an architect or something. This was like my early penmanship experiment. But I was really kind of looking and say, okay, so cost is a really big deal. And I said here, I was like, most important, because we were trying to figure out these people were making a couple dollars a day. This is just bikes as they were represent, were like, somebody would think of it like trying to buy a house in cash. You know what I mean? It's so rare for people to have enough money to buy all cash offer on a house. Like, we get a loan and we pay for it with time. And so the same issue, we really need to bring the price down. And we still, this day, you'll hear more with World Bike, but it's still a big challenge, is figuring out what's that mechanism that we can support people, because that much cash outlay, even if it's $30 or $50, ends up being an enormous challenge to overcome. So ease of manufacture, durability. You can see these are the kind of the core things that I was trying to figure out. How do we make it adaptable to the needs? And so in that process, I'm working with these guys. We're connecting. I mean, this is an incredible blessing that these guys welcome me in. You can see this cinder block walls, like literally there's no windows. We didn't have money for that, so it was just like chain mesh, whatever you call that, cyclone fencing, as the windows. And yet we managed to eventually get connected to power, and so we had a welder, and I taught the guys how to fix bikes, and so we kind of launched into this process. And this is kind of the core group. There was a bigger group to start, and there was graft, and some crazy stuff went down. I had this guy, he had like an M16, and he was really pissed off that we had to let him go because he was stealing stuff. And I mean, you can just imagine. I mean, I was like a young kid just trying to figure out how to subsist and help and serve. And yet these guys kept me going. It was just amazing that they had been through the Contra War. And if you're familiar with that, actually, the guy in the wheelchair, he was on the Contra side, actually, and these other guys were on the Sandinista side. And this building was actually built in the Barrio of Reconciliation, which is the neighborhood where they basically gave everybody land who had been in this war. So it was basically called the best armed neighborhood in all of Managua, which is a crazy other side of the story. But long story short, they were finding a way to get along, even though they had basically fought on either side of this war. And so you could see they're sitting on the very first bike we made. And what I love about this, you can't see it terribly well probably, but there's a 20-inch rear wheel, 26-inch front wheel. This is the very first EdgeRunner. It's much longer because I wanted to be able to carry market baskets. We were taking an existing bike that had been donated, from Bikes Not Bombs in Boston, which was the kind of the group that was overseeing this project, and I was just there as the technical lead to try to help train these pieces. But it's the only English speaking, white, whatever guy and a law, just nobody wanted to be in Nicaragua at that time. So it was a wild time, but we persevered and kept learning. And through that process, I'm sort of shifting gears, but I took it to the next level, which was, I mentioned briefly earlier, where I ended up in Western Massachusetts, and I got this fellowship at the Lemelson Foundation. Granted me this opportunity, and the opportunity was to keep the work going that I started there in Nicaragua and see if I could evolve it, and ultimately turn it into a company. And so they gave some support, and this is the very first kind of, you can tell by how I'm holding it, it's very heavy. But it was the first prototype of making a bolt-on. So the first ones we made in Nicaragua were all welded together, complete bikes. But we realized that the best way we could, the idea, and really big props to my mentor Carl Bielenberg, really challenging me to say, hey, well, how are more people going to get this? And it was a huge challenge to imagine, like, well, how can you make something that would adapt to any bike? And I think that part of history gets a little bit lost because we've all moved on and everybody's kind of buying complete cargo bikes. But that early day was trying to figure out how can we make this work, and it was an extraordinary design challenge. But again, the value, what was the value that we were going to, our values were accessibility and ease of manufacture. So the ability that somebody in this kind of little workshop could basically, with there are stick welders around the world, people could put metal together, but there's no way they would be able to align a whole frame. And so it was always thinking about how do we make this thing scale in a way that it's accessible to everybody. And that was this first step in that direction. Those of you who know the story, of course, that became the free radical. But you can see this evolution. So now we've got some bent tubing, and again, early days, early stages, trying to figure out how do we make this thing work. What's the function? And that evolved. Again, this was a kind of the, we now call it World Bike, but at that time it was just me getting some grant money, and this is going to South Africa as a volunteer with a group called the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, which is a mouthful, but it's ITDP for short, where I met my good friend Paul White, who has gone on to awesome things in the world. So we're there, and we're again, this guy Sam, we brought in, and I'm training him how to weld and how to make these things, and then he stayed on, kind of working out of that container with the tools he needed to basically be able to produce these. And that was the whole thing. How do we kind of get this engine going around manufacturing and the bikes that could do stuff for people to help them? So all the while, this is my deep passion, and yet I'm really challenged by this idea of this just seems like it needs to be more sustainable, right? We're trying to figure out how do we make these things affordable, and how do we get them in, and I'm having to go raise money and kind of volunteer and go here and there. And I thought I got influenced by some really forward-thinking entrepreneurs who convinced me that actually the most forward-thinking thing to do would be to start a business. And I was, at that time, I was like, I was kind of like anti-capitalist and all that sort of stuff. And they said, no, like this, you don't understand. Like, business is an incredibly powerful tool for making change. And so that I kind of got caught up in that, and started down this path of what I would call a deep green design and business. And again, the I always say at that time the sort of the gold standard was Ben and Jerry's, which to this day I don't know where you land on it, but Ben and Jerry's got bought and stuff, but it was this like, oh wow, this is this great example of a business. And yet, in truth, I would always, at that time I was vegan for probably 10 or 15 years, and I was like, well, geez, they're making this product's not even organic, and like it's got this great nice sheen on it, but the reality is, like, it's selling people something nice. Of course, eating ice cream is yummy, but where's the good in that? Like, where's the why can't we make something that's well made, that is made to last, but also in its use, it creates good, as opposed to what we found out later about Ben or Jerry. One of them, had the quadruple bypass. I mean, there's a lot of things about sedentary life and overconsumption of certain foods that really aren't leading to coming alive, right? And I think that's been one of the deep ideas here. So we launched on down this path, and joined at this time. So got some things started. One of my old friends from Stanford had gone off and worked at Rocky Mountain Institute, been a raft guide. His name's Kipchoge Spencer, and he came back, and I was kind of trying to do this thing, and he said, I see this, we're going to make this happen. And he brought a tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm and kind of bravado, honestly, like kind of just courage, and it really helped, because there was so much challenge in those early days of resistance. And people were like, okay, you guys, it was that, if you've ever seen that TED Talk, How to Start a Revolution in 5 Minutes by Derek Sivers, he talks about the second guy is the one that really makes it the movement. And Kipchoge coming in and joining me was like a big part of saying, we're going to do this thing. And I think that's also, I can kind of highlight that as kind of probably one of the key parts of that Cargo Bike 2.0 because Kipchoge really got, and he and I both resonated around this idea that this is fun. Like we were both adventurers. We got to know each other at this vegetarian commune co-op at Stanford, and there was a bunch of freako weirdos there, but we were going to change the world, and cook for each other, and bake bread, and it was an awesome experience. And he taught me how to kayak, and early on, and so we've had all these adventures, and we started carrying kayaks and surfboards, and it was like that spirit of adventure. I think is what kind of shifted things out of just get something done, right? I mean, when you think about play and fun and adventure, it's less about like I just got to get from here to there and bring my stuff, which was again that sort of heavier, less inspiring, and really at that time fairly dead notion of cargo bikes in the world. And what we brought in with Cargo Bike 2.0 was let's come alive, let's make this fun, let's make a party, and you'll see some more pictures. But this is kind of the early hard stages of trying to just hack this thing out as a business, and it was hard. I mean, I'll be honest, like it's kind of easy, as Steve Jobs said, to connect the dots looking backwards. But when you're in it, doing it, it's very, very difficult, and there's so much uncertainty, and it takes a tremendous amount of courage. So one of my deep side passions, and if there's any way I can support you out there, is like doing your passion, doing the thing that's hard, because that's what it's going to take to make this whole thing work. And so this is me, and this is how I did it, and we just went after it. You can see I mean, geez, how many different versions and styles and ways that we had to kind of go through it to make this work. It was amazing. I mean, just it was a mind-boggling amount of work and effort to kind of iterate and evolve and break something and make another one, and learn as we went. And then as we went, of course, we had these things. We're riding them, we're having fun, we're going to the river, we're carrying guitars and girlfriends and potlucks and picnics, and so many really fun, again, lifestyle changing, just kind of like, whoa, what is this thing? This is how I want to live, right? I mean, and that's, I think, the thing that's kind of hardest for me is to relate from, as somebody who's in their 40s. I've never not really known this, and I think for and my kids don't know anything else, and it's probably part of the way I'm certain it's the way I wooed my wife, so yeah, so it's pretty awesome for me, but it's like one of those challenges is like, how do I kind of reach out and relate to those who are trying their hardest to figure out, is this a good fit for them? But again, we were just trying to figure it out, and you can see, I just wanted to kind of give you a sense for, I mean, this is barely, I don't know, there's a very small number of the iterations we took. But again, we say, okay, so we've got this product, right? Again, the hardware matters. It's hard. I mean, there's the reason they say it's hardware. It's very challenging. In this day of software, we think just snap your fingers. I mean, it's not to say that making software is easy, but it's instantly scalable, and it's just moving molecules, and all the aspects of just even welding and alignment and all these things, materials, and even just like, yeah, quality and the impact on the environment. There's so many layers that come in when you're making a physical object that most people just kind of don't understand. And I could give a whole other webinar on that one. But what became clear to me was far more, well, at least as important, and then ultimately far more important, was how we talked about this. How do we grow this movement? And that's where this Cargo Bike 2.0, the original lifestyle cargo bike, really got its roots. And you can see this was us in our first catalog, trying to establish, like, look at this is two lovers going to the river, to the beach. They got their picnic, and they their bike and the guitar, and it was just trying to tell a story, like, look at this, there's this other life available. Meanwhile, of course, like I said, there's there's the whole hardware side, and you can see here the Free Radical, which is our first major product. That was, you saw all those bikes lined up on the wall, or those frames that we were building. This is many years in the making. This catalog came out at least 5 or 6 years after I was first in Nicaragua. So this is, all these things, and we had to invent and create and name, everything from the front attachment plate to the, we called it the oh yeah, the French nut, so many hilarious things, the snap deck and the freeloaders and the wide loaders. I remember this one, drive from California to Las Vegas for Interbike, and just this, we got the U-Haul full of stuff, and Kipchoge and I are driving along, just hadn't slept for a month, and we're trying to like go through and name all these things, and it's just like, think about that, like none of this stuff existed before, and we were trying to figure it out. So that was kind of just a view into that. Again, this is a view into the Pleasant Revolution. This is our beloved school bus, Miss Millie, that was named after the Millie is the Millennium. We bought her for this trip when, you remember, way back when, 2099, everything was going to melt down. So we said, well, if the world's going to go, go down in flames, we'll be on a river somewhere. So anyway, it turns out we got back and everybody was fine. But we had a good time while we were at it. So kayaks and adventures and friends was a big part of this. And again, that you can just see these elements layering in. And one of the pieces here that you'll realize is that our third. So I've mentioned the first one was be a good butterfly. Second one is run the edges, or be an edge runner. The third one that though I love to point out is be ready for anything. And Millie was a great example of being ready for anything. Not only did you have your kit on board and whatever, but she broke down a lot. I spent a lot of time with tools working on the side of the road, and we ultimately retrofitted Millie to run on vegetable oil, and so that had its own cascade of challenges. And but it was pretty awesome, like pulling up to McDonald's and like pumping the fuel out, and then just like driving along smells like French fries. Most people don't know that whole side, but we were just committed to like everything we did was going to be the highest order of environmentalism and environmental stewardship, but also kind of inspiring and kind of like bringing the best ideas we could into the mix and inviting all the best people we knew to join us and being inspired by all of that milieu of people in the mix. Very, very cool and inspiring time. But you can just see how it again. This whole thing is I'm talking about values driven design, and you can just see the values that are underlying this. I don't have the slide in here, but in the early days, like we were so committed to, we weren't going to buy paper, so we went down to literally would ride our bikes down the hill to there's like a little elementary school and talked them into letting us go through all the the recycling next to the copier, and we would pull all the paper out and collate it into one sided and print a watermark on the backside, right? Ride our bike up the hill. And it was funny, from time to time people would say, well, I got somebody's like pay stub or whatever. Like, no, somebody hadn't like shredded information they probably should have. So we were like sending out like, it was just a wild time. But again, we were just so committed to doing it right, and our values were so steeped in like, look, this is going to be a pleasant revolution. Like, we believe that the world needs to see massive shift, right? The collision course with calamity is just it's scary and just felt like such a doomsday scenario. We said, no, this could be awesome. And yes, I get that it feels harder and it feels challenging, and yet believe me, when you're on the other side, it's so worth it. This lifestyle changes everything, and yet it's so hard to see it when you're on the outside. And on that, I just would love to. I should have a slide in here to promote Motherload, this incredible film that's just come out. You should go online, Motherload, the movie, I think it is, and it's LOAD, Motherload. Shot, directed, produced, and with a bunch of awesome people. But the leader, Liz Canning, really, has been at this for about 8 years, following me and my journey and exercise, but really more her own journey. And I think what's so awesome about that is it captures the spirit of what it feels like to go from being on the outside to being on the inside, to the life changes and the things that happen to us in the beneficent, wonderful kind of coincidences and beauties that we encounter. And as a parent, how that impacts you. And her story in particular, talking about her own journey with her twins, and it's a really, really moving story. So I highly, highly implore you to watch that film. But there's an amazing number of it's an incredible microcosm of this community I'm talking about, where these community screenings. And I mean, just talk about edge running, right? I mean, she created this film and it wasn't welcome. It wasn't allowed. It wasn't no film fest or Sundance and all these fancy pants documentary filmmakers couldn't get it. And yet there was just this incredible cadre of people said, I want to show it. Like, I don't care if they don't like it. Like, I love this. And that's what's been so moving and inspiring. And that's, again, just, I think, just maybe a nice little window into what's possible when you move into this lifestyle, if you're on the outside. And if you're on the inside and you haven't seen the film yet, get with it. It's awesome. So again, this is just a little rampage, little storyline. I wanted to show you some of the images that came out of that spirit of how do we show this lifestyle. It's we're moving from the weight and the challenge, let's get stuff done, to like, let's come alive, and so this is carrying surfboards and riding to in Santa Cruz, and just the fun and the light and the fisheye lenses are all part of of kind of this larger than life and fun and inviting. It's our good friend and musician Gabe Dominguez calls Extra Cycle, a product in the form of an innovation. I mean, it's our invitation. And it's like an invitation to join us. It's an invitation to experience yourself at a deeper level. It's an invitation to a lifestyle that you didn't even know existed and yet you always wanted. It's an incredible notion that he planted, this idea of a bicycle as an invitation. And so you can see, this is my dear friend Darren Rhodes, world-renowned yoga teacher and incredible bendy guy. We shot this photo, and this went into the Prana catalog. If you know that company, has a really really big name in the yoga world, and so they had a full page picture of this. Again, just like people must looked at that and thought, what is going on in this image? But it was that merger of play and fun and wacky, and this is like trying to get people to like snap out of their kind of like locked in mode and imagine, wow, this is something different. That was the goal. You can kind of start to see among these images, for lack of a better word, like there's this idea of like, so many. It's done so tastelessly for so long. Like, cars and cigarettes and all these things are like, oh, you're gonna get the babe if you have that, and it's like, and yet it's so shallow and so weird. And for us, like what we were finding in our relationships was a greater depth and a greater experience of togetherness and challenge and beauty. And so, again, trying to capture the spirit of this connection, what I would call the sexiness of the fertile, beautiful, wonderful aspects of this lifestyle. Um, Again, adventure and bringing our surfboards and just having these, again, kind of extreme adventures, which was the point, was not to be extreme, it was to get people's attention. And that's why it's so important that this is not about work. It was about fun and play and vitality and freedom, and that's what we stand for. And that's what I think, more than any other company out there, we live this. It is our value, is our values that is guiding this process. And if this resonates for you, you'll know that that's what you're jumping into, should you decide to take the courageous leap. So again, just getting after this, and keep going here. Again, just how do we make this beautiful and enticing? And again, this is all these images are just my attempt to kind of capture some of the past, to say this is what we were trying to communicate about the world's first lifestyle cargo bike. Again, this is First Comes Love. This is actually my sweetheart, Shannon, on the back of my bike, surfing in Bali, and shot by our dear friend Michael Topolovac. And yeah, brings back good memories. This is, as I say, then comes marriage. This is some good friends who asked me to shoot their wedding, and they are riding the Extra Cycle. And again, just like we say, that the big transition for Extra Cycle came with kids. So first comes love, then comes marriage. As they say, then comes the baby in the baby carriage. This is, just a wonderful, this is an early sort of super user, Don Lubach, and we shot him dropping off his daughter at school, and I love that. I just happened to capture in the sign, be responsible, which is, I think, such a cool message, for parents who, when you think about normally the drop-off line is like just a bunch of idling cars, and is that being responsible? What's really, and not to guilt trip anybody, because I know what it's like to be a busy parent, but to say, is that what you want? Like it's more about be responsible to your values, whatever those are, figure them out. For us, being ready for anything, was a big part of it, but also to be moved. And so this is the phase where that's our fourth core value, is be moved. Be moved is about vulnerability, authenticity, leading with the heart. It's about the willingness to stand up and share, what's authentic for you. And that's what I'm trying to do today. Hopefully it's coming through. I'm trying my hardest to mash this through the interwebs to you, to see that I'm so passionate about this lifestyle and this world that we've been growing, and these products that support it. So again, just building on that, you can just see it kind of like, just kind of went, you can look online and just see amazing, the shift. I mean, you can study Google images, and you see, like, if you were to map them out by time, like there's this inflection point where it went from bikes to get work done to bikes that make you come alive. And you can just, this is just a fun example of some images that I love, that I found online. I love this guy. He's got his mom on the back and his son, and somebody else is like in Holland, and just really amazing, creative, zany, passionate, the freaks, we like to say. of the world that adopted this and made it grow. And I mean, this is my heartfelt shout out to all of you for leading the charge, for being the first one on your block, for doing the hard work. You are edge runners, and it's that's why I do this work and why I continue. I believe we're moving something major forward in the world. It's giving people a positive thing to do that can be a contribution to some of the challenges that our world is facing today. So I thought no message about kids would be complete without a plant from my own son. I handed him my phone the other day when I was dropping him off at school, and he recorded this.
Going faster than these cars right here. Oh, look at them. Going past them. Hey, bikes rule!
I don't know if you could hear that, but he said in the end, he said, "Bikes rule." All right, so with that said, we're gonna move on. So as we kind of started out at saying, like, my early days in Nicaragua and writing that research paper, it was all about how do we impact the global transportation, and it really essentially it was looking at, you can almost think of it as like a bicycle pickup truck for a rural farmer. That kind of became one of the most obvious uses for bicycles because people had small plots of land, and it was often prohibitively expensive to get their goods to market. They had small numbers of goods, and if they could do that affordably, they could eke out a little bit more of a living. And that was kind of where this idea of the bicycle pickup truck kind of came in, because people aren't really riding for recreation or fun, or it's just not, that's not what's going on there. You're lucky to have a bike, period. And so finding a way to get some work done, that was critical, and that's where we started, and that's where I get really deeply the importance of bikes that can do work. It just turns out that the way I ultimately came to see that the way we're going to change the world is not by showing how bikes can haul more stuff than trains or cars or trucks, because that's obviously crazy, but instead to say how much more fun they are, how much more like ultimately I came to this conclusion that the way we were going to change the world was by broadcasting and exporting a different culture from the United States out around the world. And at the time, you might remember that show Baywatch. And I remember it was like, I had this thought, like, man, what if we could get like Pamela Anderson to ride an extra cycle and save the day, So it'd be like, because it was like the most watched television show in the world. I thought maybe that would impact these people around the world who are sadly, what we would run into was wanting to get a motorcycle or a car, and that upwardly mobile, that sort of image that again had largely been promulgated by our media culture and Hollywood and just interested parties who wanted to sell people on a car, and the car lifestyle, even though it was just going off a cliff. And so deeply woven into the values of this company were the recognition that if we wanted to see global change, we would need to change ourselves, and we would need to change the culture and the ways that we're exporting our values and the imagery and the vibrancy of this other image was what we thought, hey, this might move the needle. But meanwhile, of course, we had to also keep trying to develop these bikes so they could be affordable, so that people could manage to get on one. And to that end, we continue to evolve that. And I have just a couple of slides to show you, or images you can see, kind of from fish carriers to bread carriers to water carrying to passengering to grain to flowers. There's just all sorts of different people across the world. This is just a snippet, and it's a very very budget organizations, all volunteer, worldbike.org. So the website is probably woefully inadequate. Need to update a bunch of stuff. We just did an incredible trip to Cuba, and evolving the design of a BC taxi that uses solar power and electric. And it was so inspiring to see people light up when they realize, like, this is like a perpetual motion machine, when in a country that frankly is facing tremendous, wacky, politically, derived, pressures, but still, the lack of gasoline, petrol there is so significant that actually bicycle taxis are viable, and yet lots of distances and just the difficulties of the actual physics have made it so that having an assist might make some sense. There's the money for that, so we've been pushing that forward with some of the board members, Craig Calfee and Peterson, when we went there and started built the second version, and they continued to test it and brought an extra cycle there. People love that, so pretty cool ongoing mission as well at worldbike.org. So onward. So unexpected for many people But again, coming from this place of values, many people don't understand why we manufacture our bikes in Asia. And early on, we made everything um, right near where I am here today in North San Juan, California. Unlikely place. I mean, I had to teach people how to weld, and it was just difficult. I mean, let me put it that way. Like, I used to say, I think it was probably cost us about $600 per product that we were selling for $400. Like, you can see that was not going to make a good business. But people really misunderstand. They think, oh, well, you just went to Asia because it's cheap. And the reality is, what I came to see is, I mean, I kid you not, we were paying our welders, because I was training basically, guys that needed a job, how to weld. We were paying less than the welders were making in Taiwan, and I will say that there's a big difference in terms of the different parts of Asia. Most people kind of think of Africa almost like a country, and yet it's like it's a continent. It's kind of the similar way for Asia. There's so many different ways, and if you haven't been, it's really hard to picture it because you maybe get the images that the media shares. But for me, coming from my place of values, which maybe you've seen enough by now to know that I was not going to go and just be like, yeah, whatever, just make some stuff. Like, we were going to do it the best way we possibly could. And and I was told actually by the trading companies that we worked with that we were the only, in fact, the first company to ever ask, for instance, where the wash water went. Because when after you weld a frame and you're gonna get ready to prepare it for painting, you have to basically do this rinse. And I was like, well, where does the water for that go? And so we've again just back to that thing of running the edges. I did forget one. So I mentioned B Moves was our fourth. Number five is We Ride Together. And before I move off of World Bike, I wanted to kind of say that our fifth one is We Ride Together has to do with so many things. Obviously, our bikes carry passengers, so we're riding together as families and as friends and as lovers, and all that is awesome. But it's actually also deeply connected to a sense of a global mission, which is to say that I ride so that you can ride too. Like, it's about a global accessibility model, that what we stand for at Extra Cycle is that when somebody gets our products, like when you ride our bikes, like you're enabling others. We have a linkage to our nonprofit. The more successful financially we are, the more we're able to support that work as well. But it's been such a labor of love to this point, and the reason why is because it's just this vision of saying we ride together. And it's maybe it's too complex, but I think for you guys it's not too complex. You get this is, the world is not just sound bites. There's nuance, there's challenges to understanding. And I think for us, We Ride Together captures the spirit of why we're doing this. We're all in this together, but it also captures the spirit of kind of like what my dear friend Charles Ford says, lead from behind, which is to say that, like, if anybody's left out, then we're all left out. Like, it's like you don't win by sort of just screwing everybody else. And again, just want to kind of capture that sense of the spirit, because when we went to Taiwan, that was crucial to make sure that that was also part of the situation. And we've done all sorts of investigation into the factories we work with and trying to understand the relationships and the people and sitting down and having meals together. And yeah, for instance, Taiwan has universal health care. They have, I mean, it's not a perfect place. I'm not gonna, but what's amazing is, like, our all the factories that we're welding in are all wind powered. It's an incredibly windy part of the coast in Daja, and so you can just see that there's all these kind of amazing aspects to it, that I came to see the efficiencies that they got and how they were able to pay their people more, but actually charge less than we had to, pay for here. The product came out was because you get these enormous efficiencies at the scale of the way the country was set up with these. Actually, what's kind of amazing, it's very common. Almost all the factories that I've been into, they're essentially part of the vast majority are close to a house or part of a house. And the family all lives there together, and it's out in the middle of a rice field, and it's not this kind of megapolis, kind of gnarly sort of dystopic view we often think of, which China is more like that, to be honest. But Taiwan has got this other thing, and it evolved out of its culture and its roots, and the government's kind of orientation towards helping people get a leg up, and it's miraculously kind of transformed. That country, it's crazy. I probably see more Ferraris there now than than I see in San Francisco or something. It's like the affluence. That's not to say that's a good thing, but it is to say that affluent, the country has generated through its resourcefulness and through these processes. It's it's definitely a first world country, so which is that transition happened over the 20 years I've been working there, which is kind of astounding. So just to say that, just to kind of give you a view in, this is an example of like a shared meal, getting together. It's very valued in that culture to eat meals together, and the food is kind of on this lazy Susan. You pass the food around that way, and you eat with your chopsticks, and you share and you connect, and it's one of the things again that speaks to our values and how we ultimately could trust and feel good about working there and about the products that we were creating. So speaking of products, you're probably wondering what in the heck are we doing here? Let's talk about some products. So I wasn't sure, but I think we could call we're on the third generation, sort of probably more like five or six. But if you kind of sweep all that early work in Nicaragua and stuff away, and you say the first generation was the free radical, then you could say the second generation was the EdgeRunner. And the EdgeRunner came about as a marvelous collaboration between Charles Ford and Justin Lamiro Moore, who's just a e-bike wonder kid from ebikes.ca, and Sam Whittingham from Naked Bicycles. We all kind of ended up converging around this idea that became the EdgeRunner. And the EdgeRunner was the first thing that made me say, okay, we'll make a complete bike, because before that I just had been content to go and help Surly make their own bike, or go and help Turn make their own bike. And so we really felt like, oh, just we'll just help other people, because I don't really feel like I have anything to bring, in the sense of, my thought from the beginning of this has always been like, I'm going to try to get this going so I can actually go back to what my true passion was when I was in college, was medical device design. And that's a whole other story we could tell. But I kept this I would say ExtraCycle was like a puppy that followed me home, and I just keep caring for it because I care for it. And yet it wasn't, something I chose in an interesting way. Yet back to the values, my values spoke to me to say, well, if you want to see this show up in the world, then you're going to need to give your time to it. You need to give your love to it. You're going to need to give your money to it. You need to gather people around to make it happen. And to that end, that's what we've been doing for 20 plus years now. So wherever you joined us in this journey, I really I want to thank you for your courage. I want to thank you for your vision. And if you're already riding, know how much that means to me. And if you're looking in, know that you're going to be in good hands should you choose to ride with us, because we ride together. So with this in mind, I'm going to go through some of the awesome new products that we have that I would call Gen 3. So the first one I'll call out is the Stoker. I don't know if you can see it. I'm wearing my Stoker shirt. And this is a bike that the desire here with so again, saying we started with the Free Radical. The Free Radical was awesome because you could put it on any bike. So we experienced all types of different bikes, mountain bikes to cruiser bikes to more like touring bikes, and so you got this flavor of a cargo bike in all these different kind of unique directions, and each one had its own tonality and ride quality, and it taught us a tremendous amount over all those years of converting bikes, like what worked and what was fun and what we wanted to see more of. And to that end, we ultimately went from the EdgeRunner, like I mentioned. Some of you may not know what the EdgeRunner was. So that collaboration yielded a bike that had a 20-inch rear wheel. Again, oddly and amazingly, if you were here at the beginning of the talk, I showed you that photo from Nicaragua. It was an obvious choice because of the strength of that wheel, the gearing that you got out of it, basically the kind of automatic gear reduction you get by using a small wheel with sort of standard gear stuff. Some really beautiful synergistic, again, from a values perspective. We were being resourceful. We were reusing parts that were out there. Well, now when we got into building complete bikes, we said, what would we do? And this one, what's awesome about the Stoker is it was really, again, you saw those pictures of us riding off road, going kayaking, having fun, having adventures. We realized that to move, one of the awesome things we could do from the EdgeRunner, which had that 20-inch wheel, one of the trade-offs there is that if you're going to ride off road, often the rear derailleur on a 20-inch wheel bike is quite close to the ground. And so we said, well, it'd be fun. Let's go with a fatter tire, 24-inch. And so we have the two 24 inches, which kind of, to me, it was designed essentially to speak to the person who wanted kind of almost like the do-it-all bike. When we worked with Surly, we helped them create the Big Dummy, and again, it was a cool collaboration, and yet, interestingly, the Big Dummy hasn't changed since then. It was like 2006, and we just keep evolving, and so what we've brought forth here was kind of some of the learning from that. I would say the 26-inch wheels on the Big Dummy were, good if you wanted to kind of race it somehow. And you saw some people do that, like kind of just for fun, like riding and races and kind of doing that kind of riding. But we saw that what most people wanted when they bought, and I will say it was many times it was guys in the bike world, but not exclusively by any means. But just to say there's an orientation towards this uh, of people who love bicycles, and we always call it the N+1 set, right? It's like what's the right number of bicycles, is the number you have plus one, right? And so that group of people, when they saw the cargo bike, they said, cool, I'll have one of those. That looks fun. And yet what we saw that they wanted to do was ride around town, be able to help their friends move, get their kids to school, but also go bike camping and maybe go do some trail work and maybe take a picnic to the beach, and so, or carry their stand-up paddleboard or whatever it was. So the Stoker really is all about stoking the fun, right? It's that kind of combination of our early adventure roots with our later sort of family and lifestyle pieces merged together. And I can't tell you. I mean, I'm wearing the shirt. I'm a big fan, but it's been a tremendous development, and if you get a chance, I highly recommend check it out. This is what it looks like in the studio. Kind of again, maybe a little bit influenced by the free ride and those early mountain bikes that we were converting, and being a child of the early mountain bikes, we used fewer, like a lot of times we've used curved tubes, and we just went with kind of a more classic look. But it's got this extra cycle signature triangulation of tubing, and to make for a more torsionally rigid while still being supple. One of our core values has been to use chromoly steel. We're probably one of the last dinosaurs, except for maybe BMX bikes that get just beaten up. The street riding that people do; those are still made with chromoly. But the vast majority of people have gone to aluminum because it's cheap. It's actually a lot cheaper. Which is different. When I first started, aluminum was a little more expensive than steel, but it flipped, and so it's commonly chosen, and it has some merits to it. But I think for a bicycle that's intended to last, meaning like our point of view is that we're going to make bikes that will last a lifetime, and you'll continue to ride them throughout your life. The chromoly is just the absolute right choice. It's dependable, it's reliable, the ride quality, it's comfortable, it doesn't kind of beat your body up. But it's also far more repairable. And I know this because I broke my first stump jumper that was like this fancy, I forget, they had some name for it. It was basically an aluminum bike, and I wanted to fix it. It's like, no way, you just can't. It's just not possible. Whereas you can any basic welder can help. If you're on the roadside in Nicaragua, they could fix your steel bike. So not easy. Stick welding a thin wall high performance material like this is not simple, to say the least, but you can do it. And so, and you'd be surprised how talented some of these welders are. So that's the Stoker. Some of the things that are cool that you can see in this, supports dual batteries. Some of the things that we did in this third generation was we really opened up all of our bikes to be adaptable. So we've always had them be adaptable for all the accessories that we build, and I'll get into that later. You can see in this picture some of the bags, the cargo bay, as well as the porter rack and porter pack as core functionality. You also see the Kickback 3 that we developed is this awesome, stable, lightweight, highly useful kickstand, center stand, which almost anybody out there who knows anything about cargo bikes will say. I always have felt like a good center stand is kind of like the holy grail of design, because for a long tail cargo bike, when it's unloaded, it basically rides like a regular bike. But when you load it up, it's a full blown cargo bike, and so you need the stability, and you need the lightness, and you need it needs to kind of fold out of the way to ride like a normal bike. While when you load it up, to be able to have that kind of heavy duty stand, so you can see that in there. But I got myself off track here. What I was just going to say is that we have been working with Bosch, which again, kind of a crazy story. I mean, I tell the whole story sometime other time, but we were Bosch's first U.S. customer. We were so clear. We were looking ahead. We saw how they were developing. We were very fortunate. Like the new wheel and some Brett and Karn said, "Hey, you guys really got to check this out." And we were tracking it and said, "Wow, they have the reliability we want." What they have, like at that time, electric assists were just kind of like a backwoods kind of thing. And our first partnership we did around it was very, very frustrating and challenging because of the quality issues there. And so when we learned about, in fact, we canned that. We went away from making our own, and we started just retrofitting with Bionics and other kits, which are also lacking. And so when we learned about Bosch, we realized that it had of course, it's an enormous company, but they've when they really committed to doing the e-bike thing, they had the reliability, they had the quality, they had the software, they had the interface, all the parts. Ultimately, they made something very enjoyable bike-like, which supports this lifestyle that I find is so important when you, in particular, there's all these different ways, and I want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but just to say that a torque sensing setup is the most bike-like. And while I've ridden both torque sensing and throttle controlled, I'm a big fan of the torque sensing just from the perspective that it just feels like you're kind of like a human, you know, like a, what do they call it, like an bionic human, exactly. Thank you, Shan. So it's just like, yeah, like I say, like if short of being in the military, that's the closest you'll get to being a bionic human is riding an electric bike, because you just go faster. It's amazing. For the same amount of power output from your legs, you go faster. You feel more wind in your hair. You life kind of lights up. Talk about coming alive, right? I mean, that's why 22 years ago when I built the first one, it was so obvious. The technology wasn't there and the reliability wasn't there, but that's where when I saw the Bosch for the first time, I knew that it was absolutely what we needed to do. So that's what we build now, and I'll get into in the Q&A a little bit of the differences between it. So with that said, we'll move on to the swoop. So the swoop, again, is working with the EdgeRunner platform. So you can maybe be able to see in this picture, it's a little bit hard to see sometimes for people, but it's got a 26-inch front wheel. So that's kind of your normal bike size wheel, well, until the world got all freaky. But most over history, you can say for the last 20 years, excuse me, it's been the dominant. And then you can see it has a 20-inch rear wheel, which is kind of more like you'd think of like BMX bikes or freestyle bikes have typically had that, or folding bikes have had a 20-inch rear wheel. And what that design did, again, was the original EdgeRunner was to lower the center of gravity. It has some advantages when you're electrifying it. There's a bunch of things that are cool, but it was a particularly significant innovation around making a bike more useful and more handleable by more people, and it was a cool thing. It was unusual. Now it's been knocked off, but it still stands out as a primary thing. So then when we evolved it, I said it was actually going back to the early free rad days, where I realized that some of the best bikes that we loved were the step through bikes, but they never rode very well because they had too much flex in the frame. It took kind of a more experienced rider, and so it was always for me this kind of values driven design. It was like, how do we? It's like, I always realized that a step through, we tend to think it was a lady's bike, but step through is actually a utility feature, and we're in the utility business, so we should be making a step through bike. But it was so challenging because of the way longtails work. The torsion that gets introduced by your cargo all has to be translated through the headset or the head tube, and because of that, it was a significant challenge to figure out, particularly when you add in the electric and some other things, how to make it stable. And many people have said this is an incredible bike. It's maybe one of the best cargo bikes ever designed. And like I said, I'm not gonna brag on myself. I will say the day that I drew this out, I just like, it was like a kind of one of those like, whoa, like like the sunshine came down, because yes, I think this could work, and I think the way we designed it will make the torsion work. And so there's a bunch of things, and it's beautiful, and it's just, and so anyway, that's the swoop. As you can tell, I could go on, but I won't. Here we'll say, just what I will say, that the primary vision for it was really to say, kind of like a minivan. Like, many people think minivans aren't very sexy or cool to have or something like that, but they have this incredible function, right? They're easy to get in and out of, and lots of people can sit in there, and you can load them up, and you can take the seats out, and so it's kind of that idea that form follows function, and so in this case, the swoop is really kind of a statement of saying, look, I want to primarily, we think about it as like this kind of awesome bike that doesn't require you to do anything difficult, meaning like it's easy to ride because the weight is low. It's easy to get on and off, so you can wear your normal work clothes or whatever you're wearing that day, or a skirt or whatever, and yet you can still ride and get the things done. And then when you are unloaded, you still ride home, and it's super fun and easy. And with the assist, it makes it so that you don't have to sweat if you don't want to. You don't have to get a workout if you don't want to. But you are out in the elements. You are coming alive, and that's, again, one of our core things, was to eliminate obstacles that might keep somebody from riding. So that's the swoop. The next one that we're really excited about is the RFA. RFA, as you might remember from our core values, is core value number 3, which is ready for anything. And at its essence, if you think back to my grandfather, who could build anything, who could fix anything, grew up on a farm, that just got instilled in me, right? Like when you're out in the world, just this last weekend, we were down in the, the canyon and got a flat and, perched on the side of this hill and changing this out. And it's like if you're going to have an adventure, you should know how to fix it. I was good at having this conversation with the family. And I think that's why it's such a core value for me. And so if you can imagine sort of the spirit of adventure, the spirit of being ready for anything, the spirit of like, you know what, I don't want to be held back by my equipment or that. Then trying to pack that into this compact product, we call that the RFA. So the RFA is would be classified in its long mode in terms of the utility mode. It would be classified as a midtail. So it's a little bit shorter than our EdgeRunner and Swoop and Stoker, but it actually has a fairly large cargo area, particularly for kids and passengers. So there's this the big shift or the big sort of innovation around it. So aside from, again, there's a world of midtail, which not a huge departure in terms of innovation, to say, oh, long tail cargo bikes might be too long. Maybe if I want a shorter one, right? So that's just, bike world has understood that for a long time. Really easy to make a bike that's slightly longer or much longer. But what we really came through with on the RFA was, again, how do we bring our values in? And one of the biggest things that I'd heard over the years was that people were frustrated by well, they had this idea, particularly for people who, well, some people who had already had a long tail would say, oh, well, my kids are grown. I don't need as much cargo space. So there was this idea like maybe I don't need all that much bike later. And that's always a question people have. I find that especially with electric assist, it's great to have that ability, the capacity there, kind of like, if you think about driving a pickup truck or something, you don't really feel the weight of the load in there, or the cargo area, and the pickup truck doesn't take anything away from you. And then it's there if you need to help somebody move, or put a couch in there or whatever. And so I always thought, hey, great, keep riding. But for some people, there was this idea, hey, I'd really like to kind of have a more normal bike, kind of maybe once I'm done with shuttling my kids or whatever. On the other side of the equation is people looking in, meaning didn't have a cargo bike yet, and we're kind of looking in saying, man, those bikes look like maybe a little bit more than I can handle. And what I can say is, we have so much experience with the long bikes that they're actually much more easy to handle than you'd think. They sort of have this, un, you know, disproportionate sort of perceptual weight and complexity. So it's always good to just recognize that what we know, our perceptions don't always serve us when we're dealing with something new. But to that end, we also thought, well, for some people, they might be reluctant to jump into this. In fact, we saw many people kind of just never quite get in, and then later on be like, oh, I just wish I jumped in. I wished I'd done it. And so you can't see the bike. I'm getting a sign here.
Maybe switch.
Switch what?
Oh, this is getting covered here.
Oh, the bike. Oh, I see. I can't. I don't know how to do that. Anyway, we will. Sorry, stand by. Technical difficulties. No, I clearly don't know what I'm doing here. But I don't know how to fix it. But I can do it. So I can just go this way. Hey, there's the bike. Sorry for those of you who are wondering. My support team is saying, "What? Can't see the bike? What's going on?" And I have no idea what was going on about that. But now you might be able to see. This is the RFA in sport mode. So sport is really essentially like a normal wheelbase bike. It's super fun. I've been riding one around. Shannon took ours and went mountain biking with Kale a couple weekends ago. Had a blast. So it's really does deliver on that idea of a bike. Now what that kind of just feels sporty and fun. You can see it's got a rack on there. It also works with our porter rack natively. But what I can tell you is that this I need a better graphic to show you guys kind of, but the vision for this bike, sorry I got interrupted, I got a little bit off my flow there, but the vision for this bike was, you could almost think of it like an heirloom, something that you would pass down from generation to generation. And in my view is say, okay, great, we know that we've been making bikes that had utility, and that kid carrying became this obvious use. I mean, just dropping kids off at the line is just like a pain in the butt, and it would just seem crazy. And for the people who are just like this, I just feels like, I'm an idiot. Like, why am I sitting here idling when, I watched somebody just ride by that clearly looked like more fun, right? That was that's been one of the winningest applications that we've seen to date. And in our vision, we absolutely see that people, once they start riding, they end up riding much more and throughout the rest of their life. Well, our vision would say, great, wherever you get this in your life, maybe you get this, you're incredibly lucky and you're able to get one when you go off to college. And so then you have a way to get carry your books and maybe do your laundry or go grocery shopping. And then later on, you maybe have a family, so you want to, lengthen it out and have that. And then later on, you want to go back to a short bike. What I will say is one of the really cool things we've learned over all these years of making long bikes is that long bikes are inherently more stable. And I know this partly because my dad not that long ago had a wreck on his bike, and after that I demanded that he ride an RFA. And he's told me yesterday when we talked that there 2 days ago, whenever it was, that he really feels like he wouldn't have had that crash if he had been riding this bike. It's just more stable. It's got a bunch of things going for it. So what's interesting is this idea that you might have it short, you might have it long, you might make it short again, then maybe later in life you make it long again, just simply not necessarily to carry stuff, but for the stability, and for the fact that it's still fun to ride and you still want to be active. So it's actually this what do they call it, like a, well, some people say like a game changer, but it's really like what do they call that when something, a shapeshifter? The shape shifting to kind of adapt and mold to the different times. And in my dream scenario would be something like my dad might have one, and then at some point he gets to the point where he's just simply not riding anymore, and he might gift it to his grandson, and his grandson then would ride it to school or ride it to high school. So that's the dream scenario for me, is it was to create a bike, and nobody's ever done anything like this before. And frankly, it's been really misunderstood. And when people have written about it, I think they've really missed the point. They've set it up wrong. They've had the long rack and short mode, and it's just like, oh goodness, like how do we avoid this train wreck? But I'm just deeply, deeply grateful for my team and all the work and our suppliers. And this is an enormous engineering challenge to pull off the vision that I had of a bike that could meet, really be ready for anything throughout your life, as well as, all of the accessories that go with it. Just a quick shot here to show you the yellow version. We're just coming out with the blue version, which is called Vista, but this is the Sunrise version in the long mode. So that is the RFA. Um, last I think in the mix here is the Classic. You can see the Classic is basically built upon the core EdgeRunner idea. Just doesn't have the step through frame, but it does have the triangulated parts, and this is what it looks like in the studio. So that was kind of a bunch of pieces of this. Let's see, I got the wrong slide in here, so I'll skip forward to show you this. Just wanted to kind of show you the some of the cool, the sort of third generation accessories we've done. So we've talked about the Porter Rack and the Porter Pack. We've talked about the kickstand and the Kickback 3, all of which were really significant design innovations. This is kind of hard to see in this picture, but we call it the lock pocket. It's part of this X3 bundle of soft goods accessories that were set up to help do all the things you need to do day to day. And one of the things we learned was that many people, it's particularly at the outset when they started riding, they just wanted to carry their kids, so they didn't actually need a big bag to carry all the stuff that we used to say. No, you want to carry 6 bags of groceries, or you're going to want to be able to go to Costco or strap your kayak on the side. And so always in the past we had these bags that had all this extra functionality, and people didn't understand it and added the cost. So from a values driven design point of view, we said, okay, how do we tease this apart? How do we make each of these pieces independent? And how we did that was we broke out the parts. So invented something that has been called the fanny pack of bicycles. This lock pocket, just the idea really is it has a place to put your keys, your phone, your wallet, and your lock, which are kind of the core things that most people don't really want to have in their pockets when they're riding around. And so it just gives you a place for that. Then you can simply, 2 little buckles, just take it off and take it with you. On some e-bikes, you have a part that you can take off the head piece, so put that in there. This is kind of a convenient way. It's got a little carry handle on there. So just a really nice little innovation, minor, but cool nonetheless. So the cargo bay. This is kind of going through, I guess the it's like a little animation of all the parts. So you can see a bunch of the different pieces that all plug in to make it work together. So the cargo bays, the high vis lids, which are like a little shingle to kind of shed rain off and also provide visibility. So a bunch of soft goods that kind of go together to make a really useful package. So with that said, I think we're, you know what? Oh, I totally forgot to add in. Oh wait, where did it go? No, we were gonna hit. I'm gonna come back to the Q&A, but you know what? I might open up the. Oh, totally did this. Oops. I just screwed it up. Okay, I opened the wrong presentation, guys. That's hilarious. Well, what we'll do is I don't even know how to go back now. Let's see here. Thank you. Okay, I'm back in front of you here for the Q&A. But what I totally blew was that I opened the wrong presentation, which is kind of funny. And that meant that I skipped out on the whole thing that I was so excited to tell you about. So for those of you who have the long duration ability to hang in there, I can't believe I did that. I don't even know where it went. I think I accidentally closed it a moment ago, right before we were starting. So, okay, well, one of the neat things about this webinar was that I was really excited to share with you one of the key innovations we've done more recently, which is the big box of happiness. So earlier on, we were talking about if you're fortunate enough to have a shop in your town like GNO or Clever or Four Star Family Cyclery or Front Range or Bicycle Bell. Like there's so many. There's not that many. Actually, I should say there's very few. Actually, unfortunately. But these shops have been pioneers and edge runners in the bicycle industry space by saying, you know what, we're not so much interested in serving racing and the lycra clad, all that being fine. Of course, I mean that's where I came from too. But saying there's just this missing piece, and so those shops have started up literally because of ExtraCycle and are supporting this ecosystem. But the sad part is that unless you're in one of those major metropolitan areas, you won't have access to that, or you might be really far from them, and it's just it's hard to get in there. So we had to come up with something to serve all of you who didn't have that nearby. And what we did is one of the most significant innovations, and that's why I can't believe I totally blew it. I had some great photos and video to show you. So we'll pop that in somewhere else so you guys can watch it later. But basically you could see maybe geez I'm running out of time, but I totally want to show you guys this stuff. But the what's really cool is that we developed something we call the big box of happiness. And the big box of happiness. Oh man, I might be able to pull this off. Are you guys willing to hang with me for a second while I try to do this? I just quit the one that I was doing, and I'm attempt to go back over to this, which is totally dicey. I probably shouldn't attempt to do this, but okay. Let's see if this works. Okay, cool. So we're going through. I told you all about these things. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. Yay, Cynthia, purple power. All right, big box of happiness. Here we are. Okay, cool. So we did it. We did it. You guys are hanging in there. Oh my gosh, you're my heroes. Okay. Whoo, deep breath. That was dodging the technological bullet of the day. So, big box of happiness. Core aspects of it, I'll just show you. First of all, your bike is assembled by a pro just for you. So we have an incredible team of mechanics that just pour so much love in. And what's been crazy to me is to realize that actually putting our bikes together is a specialized skill. Meaning, like your average bike mechanic could figure it out, but generally speaking, they'd have to read the manuals, which nobody wants to admit that no mechanic wants to sort of read manuals, it seems like. So it's always been this challenge, like how do we get just an average bike shop that doesn't support this type of product to put everything on there right? And what we ultimately came down to is, we'll just have our team do it. They're the pros, they're awesome at it, and they do an awesome job making sure all the parts that you can just imagine. There's so many different things. One of the key things that we also developed was the meetup, the 5-minute meetup, which works in conjunction with our recommender and a couple other tools to really kind of help you navigate. Like, there are so many permutations if you think of like all the options that we offer to you between the accessories and the electric and the number of batteries and the motor and all that stuff. It's mind-boggling. And so what we found is it's really important to help you through that process. And we have a team, Jeff, as well as Marie Claire. We'll get on the phone with you for a few minutes just to talk through to make sure. And we have recently offered out this thing. If you do that with them, it ends up being really better for us, because we find that we don't want to make a mistake and get the wrong part, or just so it's really really helps them. We've found that people feel so much more confident after they have that call. They just they feel like, okay, cool, I really got a chance to talk to a real live human who understands these differences. And I had a few little questions. Almost invariably there's just like one or two questions that is kind of hanging people up. And so we created this meetup process, which is awesome, and I'm so grateful to that team that they've just been doing an incredible job. And so we actually are giving people a $200 gift card, which means you can buy kind of any accessory that we make, and get that for free. But we're also today, if you're on this call, we're going to go ahead and offer you this big box of happiness. If you go on our site right now, you'd see that we actually have to charge a fair bit for it, because the box. I mean, I don't think I've got all the details in here, but it's really expensive for us to do it. But I thought, you know what, let's just try this out. Like, if somebody is on the fence and they need help, to just say, hey, I want it. I don't have an incredible shop in my neighborhood. Or I'm out, far afield, or I just whatever. Couldn't figure out how to get it home, or whatever the things were. You want to trust that you're getting the right thing. Then it's clear that we're. It's so hard to get interrupted. Yes, I'm being told that I'm at 1 hour and 25 minutes. For those of you who are still standing, I'm still standing. So sorry, but this is exciting to me, and I might have bored you to tears. So I'm going to attempt to just quickly give you guys the rundown and then answer a couple questions. So, big box of happiness, awesome. Safety's a part of it. We have a whole system for making sure it gets delivered directly to your door. That's what the box looks like. It's kind of like a refrigerator-sized box on its size. But what's awesome, and I think I can hopefully play this. There you go. Just check this out as this bike gets delivered. The kids having a ton of fun. You can see kind of, look at them. They're wearing the hat. They're opening it up. They're getting on it. This is why we call it the big box of happiness, is because the amount of happiness that the box actually brings to the family where it gets delivered. So I hope you can see this. I love this little building. Now the kids have the markers out. They're going to turn this. That's Ike, just barely crawling, walking around. They're it's just, this is playing out over, maybe an hour. You ultimately got turned into, oh, yeah, I've got a couple of, they just fully owned it, and it fully devolved. And in the end, it was like a ramp for jumping cars off of, and the little, little Hot Wheels and stuff. So from start to finish, you can see a lot of fun was had with that. So I mentioned to you that there's a special offer for you. Basically want to offer you premium assembly and home delivery. So when you get off this call, you'll get a thank you. The particular page here is this shows you what it looks like if it gets delivered to your house. You literally just remove the box and unstrap the bike, and it's ready to ride. So there's a few little packaging pieces on there to keep it protected, but you can see that was under 5 minutes. And it was just cool to see how people are loving it. So this is a great piece that we heard back. The whole family wanted to participate, so each kid ran the drill to back the 8 screws out of the box. After that, we lifted the top, loosened the straps, and we were off. What an amazing experience. Super cool. So in case this is for you and you just feel like that would make a difference, I want to offer to you, go to this little short link. It's xcy.cl/gift, GIFT, xcy.cl/gift. You can see that on the screen, and that'll kind of take you through the process, kind of how you could claim that, and if it's something you're interested in. Again, if you're so fortunate to have a shop in your neighborhood and that you can go to, they're one that we recommend. I can definitely tell you you're going to be very pleased with that option. If you don't, this is our option for you to make sure that you are just super, super stoked. You get the bike of your dreams and you're off and running. I started this presentation by saying we care so much about your happiness, your success with this bicycle lifestyle. And to that end, it became clear to me that we needed to find a way to help you be successful from the beginning to the end. So we've built mechanisms that will help you figure out the right bike, the right accessories, the right motor, the right batteries, if that's the route you go, as well as make sure it gets assembled well and delivered to your house, and there's no hiccups, getting it home, and no hiccups with people who don't know how to assemble it, and you just have an awesome thing. And then what's amazing is then starts the journey, and we're there with you with an incredible community there to support you throughout then the next who knows how many years when you're riding. So you can just see one of the things, you might have got the email was like, we were just playing around, and somebody sort of thought it was a little bit much, but we were joking around like it borders on unethical. And the point was to say that to me, having somebody just buy the bike, meaning like when you just sell somebody a bike, I think that borders on unethical, because what I realized over these years is that to be successful with this experience, unless you're like incredibly skilled as a mechanic and love to tinker and could basically weld up your own by yourself, which is what we kind of see from people who are getting bikes from other brands. Many times that's what you have to do. Like there's so much fix-it work needed, because it's not the passion of those brands. They're really just added that bike to their line. And if you want to see more bikes and more innovation and more, and you value the journey we've been on, and if your values seem to align with ours, we wanted to give you an opportunity to have the best possible experience. And the sad thing is that many people make the mistake of buying a bike online and they end up with a big box of bolts, a project that nobody has time for. So with that said, I was going to try to answer some questions, but all those questions, so I'm going to have to go switch screens here. You guys are so awesome. Anybody who's still standing gets a gold star. Oops, let me see if I can go back. And I go there. Okay, good. Okay, so just quickly look at that. We're over time, but you know what? Bonus round for anybody who is still watching. If I can find it. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, so the first question we got was, why are extra cycle bikes more expensive than Yuba? There's actually a lot of lower cost bikes, probably even than Yuba at this point. Yuba was kind of the first knockoff. You might know that Yuba is the name of the river that was where we started the company. It was the inspiration. Kipchoge and I kayaked together. So it was an interesting sort of turn of events that Yuba got started by one of our early friends and collaborators, went off and started that, and sadly became a real competitor. And so to that end, what Yuba always did was it saved money on quality parts and on design. So they never would do kind of either of those things. And many times they've come in actually into factories after we've fully trained that and worked through all the issues that you can just imagine when you're bringing a big bike and other weird things in. We paid the price, and then it just gets added into our costs. Whereas then there's no startup cost for them, so they just kind of came in. So there's a lot of things that you kind of can't see, and it might sound like, I don't know, making excuses. I mostly wanted to give you this whole presentation so you could see that our commitment to you as a rider and to the world and to our community is so great that there will likely be offerings that are less expensive, and I'm not here to claim that we're going to make the cheapest offer, even though, as you can imagine, for me that's kind of ironic given where I started trying to make the lowest cost option. We continue to try to figure that out for World Bike, but where we're at now is that I believe that in this sort of modern day first world environment, having a safe, quality, durable bike with all the support you need to be successful with it is worth far more than people realize when they're just thinking about buying the widget. So that would be my short, probably too long answer. What's the difference between a CX and a speed motor? So there's actually three motors that we offer, three motor options. The lowest cost one is called the Performance line. Then there's the Performance line CX and Speed. CX, basically, you think of it has more torque. So if you have a situation where you have bigger hills, then it's going to be more powerful to help you get up those hills, or really more significantly help you go up those hills faster. So any of the motors will help you up a humongous hill because you have the gearing to support it. That's the beauty of the mid-drive. But the difference is that in the way regulations played out, there's this regulation around 20 miles per hour being kind of a normal bike speed, meaning you can ride on a bike path or whatever. There's a second regulation called a class 3, which can go up to 28 miles per hour. It can't have a throttle, but you can't ride it on, well, in certain states they haven't adopted it, but essentially in California and other states that have adopted this sort of protocol, you mostly can ride the 28 mile per hour on roads. But for a lot of people, that's the speed they would need to be going the speed of traffic, and it makes a big difference. Or if you're commuting and the distances are large, you can imagine you're basically getting about 50% more speed, that you're getting assistance at that speed. So it can be a game changer to have the speed, and that's why we go out of our way. We're one of the only manufacturers that offers that option. And again, when you have a meetup, you can talk in great detail if you want, or we can chat about it later. So next question was, when will we be selling bikes with the new Bosch motor, or will their bike be able to upgrade to the new motor? So if you haven't heard about it, Bosch has basically set our world in upheaval. Been a huge project for us to sort of adapt. They've changed the whole motor due to some competition and some other things. They've made the motor smaller and changed the chain ring, and so some core things that we've had to change. We have our first samples are being made right now, and I have not had a chance to test them. So what I can tell you from my own experience, again, 22 years ago, put together my first electric cargo bike. Unfortunately, it's not fully tested yet, and so I can't tell you whether I'm even 100% going to believe that the Gen 4 is a good option for cargo bikes. Now they've gone down the path that Bosch has, labeled it cargo bike, which I think is, nice from a marketing perspective. But again, there's a couple things that we know about those motors is they're smaller, which means they have like a derating that happens, which derating is essentially when a motor heats up, the electronics start to diminish its amount of assist that it gives you, because if it overheats, it melts essentially. And so we haven't tested it enough. What I can tell you is we are working on it, and we will have an answer for you within the next month or so. We'll probably do just a webinar specifically on that Gen 4 thing. But as it stands right now, I believe that Gen 2 is the most reliable, most battle tested, and plenty of power and all the things that you need. There's none of that changes really in the next version, but that's what we still continue to believe and to sell. So that's but just a quick thing to say, currently, to my knowledge, there's no way to go from a Gen 2 motor to a Gen 4 motor. There is an ongoing sort of thing of a Gen 3 actually that works with the pass. So the way this works is essentially the frame has what we call a node welded into it that holds the motor, and that part has changed essentially. Now, it's not out of the question that somebody will develop an aftermarket adapter, so you could basically put, maybe we'll do it, but that will allow you to keep using the Gen 2 once it's fully vetted and kind of at the stage where it's ready to go. Hope that answered those questions that you had for that. What's the difference between the sling set and the X3 cargo bay? This is a really good question, and it's one that I should probably have some slides to kind of really demonstrate for you. But just recently, we've been hearing like, the cargo bay is a kind of think of it more like a bag, and it will hold groceries or stuff that won't fall out. It's got a lid, all the things that you would need, kind of like a bag. But early on with ExtraCycle, we developed something called the freeloader, and it was this sling or kind of like a burrito wrap that the insight was to say so many things that this bike could carry. It can't if it's constrained. The walls are enclosed, and so what we did is we essentially made this sling options. You can kind of clip that on if you end up needing to carry a lawn chair or more bags of groceries or whatever. The sling set is a really great low cost way to add a tremendous amount of utility capacity to your bike. As a standard, I think many people kind of like maybe one cargo bay and then two freeloader or sling set. They come as a pair, so you kind of get two sides. That might be a good way to go. Kind of depends on your setup. I highly recommend the Porter Rack. It's an incredible option as well. So that, again, I highly recommend just going over some of this stuff when you have your 5-minute meetup. Okay, question about battery size that you need. Battery size is a challenging one. Range anxiety is real for a lot of people. They just don't know how far they're going to be able to go. What I can say is it is difficult to change it after the fact. So if you think you might want to, it's a good idea to order it that way from the beginning. But that said, I've found that one battery is for our types of use, unless I were commuting or going a long ride where I wouldn't have the ability to charge. I can always ride in turbo for 20 miles loaded, whatever hills I with the 500 watt hour, even the 400, which is all we had originally, had plenty of range. And the Bosch is so efficient, it's often really good, and it can give you a sense of your range. So not to talk you out of it if you really want to, but just to say I found that one is often just is plenty. Bike size is a really good question. We got this great note that said I use a pair of cargo bays for touring and camping, which is an awesome example of just it's a compact, tight cargo carrying kind of fully. The part of the thing that I'll say is early designs that I did, as well as some of the ones that I see other people making, they don't take into account, like, you make a bag really big, it needs a structure to it. Otherwise, essentially, your load is going to wobble and flop around, which ends up actually affecting your ride quality. And so part of the reason why we design the bags the way we do with all the kind of cinching mechanisms is to actually hug everything into the center. And it's part of the big reason why we don't want to have the bags be too big. So size was the question. Basically, we consolidated onto a design that I think is really deeply aligned with our core values, which is to say that how can we make a bike that's comfortable to ride, upright, visible, safe, And yet you still get sort of that power transfer that's important with a bicycle, even if it's electric. It's nice to have the highest efficiency, meaning your body's positioning on the bike is efficient. And we, over many, many years, have dialed in this system so that we can have one frame size, which is more oriented towards kind of an upright model, which is very different sizing scenario than you would think of for like a road bike or a mountain bike, where your torso is stretched out long, and it really makes a huge difference if that top tube is a centimeter longer or shorter. So we developed what I think is what was pioneering for sure at its time. I don't know if anybody else has copied it since, but a sizing kit that basically enables you to take the bike, whichever of the bikes we have, and then you size it. And the components of the sizing kit are essentially the seat post and the handlebar, the stem. And the stem essentially gets longer as you get the larger, or shorter if you're in the size small. And actually, the seat post gets not only taller, but it actually has a more of an offset, which means that effectively your top tube length grows rearward, which is a classic sort of way that people adjust frame size. We've been able to do it with those two parts. The cool thing about that is if you ever go to resell your bike, you could sell it to somebody who's smaller and just with the cost of a fit kit, change it over. You could hand it down to your kids. You could buy another one and your spouse could ride it. So there's lots and lots of reasons. It's pretty awesome. It helps out bike shops so they don't have to store so much inventory. It helps us out from having to buy, perfectly guess the right numbers and sizes, and so it's less wasteful, more efficient in terms of transportation. So anyway, long story short, that's hopefully helpful in terms of the size. But there are some sizing guidelines. If you take a recommender, almost everybody fits into the middle. It's a really, really wide range. But if you happen to be very, very short-legged, then especially on the e-bike, the seat tube height is shorter, so you can't take a really long post and stuff it down in there. So you might need the short post for that. But lots of people, in particularly families, share bikes, so they'll have two people. One person will do the drop off and one will do the pickup, and so to that end, Marie Claire or Jeff or somebody on our support team can help you figure out what the exact right thing is for you. I know I'm going long, but I'm just going to make sure you answer all the questions. And those of you who are still there, like, woohoo, I love you. And we'll see where this goes later. What are the differences between the RFA utility and the Stoker? That's a really cool question. The RFA utility and Stoker are both two 24-inch wheel bikes. So that's kind of that's kind of the thing they have in common. They're both, of course, made out of chromoly steel, and they now the big difference is that the Stoker is the long tail format, so it's a little bit longer than the utility RFA. And I would say the biggest thing would come down to probably your passengering ability is a little bit better just because of the foot clearance on. So your passenger carrying ability is better on the longer Stoker. But you can stuff a lot of people into the utility. In fact, the hoopty itself is the same size, but what you run into is actually cargo space. So if you want to be able to carry any stuff along with your passengers or their legroom, that ends up being the tricky thing. So definitely the Stoker is set up to carry more, no question about it. But it doesn't have that adjustable wheelbase. That would be the kind of main differences. And then the last question I'm going to be able to answer here is, what are the differences between the Stoker and the Swoop Classic? And again, that is just almost entirely has to do with wheel size and step over height. So the Stoker has front and rear 24-inch fat tires, so they're really have great rollability. They can roll over stuff. They absorb bumps. They're just a nice high volume, less pinch flats, more comfortable for your passengers, all that sort of stuff. That's the Stoker, and that's kind of that idea that it could ride off road, on road, as well as carry kids and cargo and stuff like that. So that's kind of all rounder. The Swoop Classic are built on the EdgeRunner platform, which is that rear 20-inch tire, which again is going to either add up to more cargo capacity, like and the ability to handle it, because that wheel's lower to the ground, the wheel is a little bit stronger, but your derailleur is going to be close to the ground, so it's not as recommended going off road. And the other side of that, of course, is the Swoop has that deep step over height, and the Classic actually has a fairly low step over height, not nearly as deep as the Swoop. But the Stoker is kind of like more like a full-size bike kind of step over. So super flying fast. I totally appreciate you guys for all your patience. I can't believe I got on the wrong slide, but you all hung in there with me. So for those of you who are interested, I invite you to go to our xcy.cl/gift page if you're interested in following up with that. Hit us up with questions. It's been such an honor and a joy to be with you today and to take you through hopefully a helpful vision into a view into our values and how they inform Extra Cycle, all we do in the world, and the designs we're bringing into the world, and our intention or our design for the world as we intend to create it. So hope everybody takes care. Ride safe. We'll see you out there.